Let's not gaslight ourselves and be like,
oh, it's a very small difference.
No, it's not. Okay, they're not familiar. Help them be more familiar by showing your DO degree. We're gonna lie to ourselves and lie to others as to why we went DO. Over the years, I actually feel stronger and stronger about my MD versus DO stance. As more data comes out, as I have more experience working with more students that are pre-meds or med students, the more and more data that piles up, the more it confirms what I've said in prior videos. Now, for those who don't know, I created a video on Med School Insiders 7 years ago, MD versus DO, and it is factually, objectively, 100% true. Even at the time, I knew that it was going to be a touchy subject, so I was very careful. Yet I got a lot of pushback. And I was like, huh, isn't this interesting? And at the time, this is like when I had just started the YouTube channel. I think I was a few months away from starting residency. I had started this YouTube channel that was this little side project that I didn't want to nerf it. I didn't want it to get canceled or whatever. So I made an apology video. And I was like, hey guys, sorry for this video. Like, I should have been more sensitive. And a couple months later, I was like, dude, what are you doing, Kevin? Like, you have nothing to apologize for. And I took that video down. Now, I have multiple friends who I went to high school with that went DO. And I asked them to watch the video as well. This is at the time when the backlash was happening. And they're like, yeah, like, I don't see what the issue is. Like, everything you said is factually right. And I was like, I know, right? Like, why are people pushing? And the issue is that as humans, we have this bias, right? There's, first of all, the loudest voices are not necessarily the most intelligent voices, unfortunately. But black and white thinking is the norm. The people that I care to listen to the most are not the loudest voices. They're the people who speak to the nuance in the gray area. But that's not the default. That's not the norm. So what you do see are people who will try to simplify what you're saying and then paint you in a negative light. It's like, oh, so what you're saying is, it's like, well, no. If I say DO students factually, objectively have notably lower MCATs and notably lower GPAs. Oh, so what you're saying is that they're not as smart. It's like, well, no, I didn't say that. So that's essentially the circle that you go in. And then you'll have the people who are like, oh, it's only like slightly lower. I'm like, really? Like an 88th percentile MCAT score to a 60th percentile MCAT score is only slightly? That's a huge, massive difference. So again, there's all this gaslighting. Okay, where does this come from? And what was my stance? My stance is we need to stop lying to pre-meds. Because there's a lot of, like, there's good intention, but I think what actually muddies it is ego. So what do I mean by that? I've made multiple videos now over the years talking about MD versus DO and how I was one of those pre-meds who almost got fooled into thinking DO was better. Is DO better? Generally, no, I would say. And I'll get to why. But I saw some presentation where this person was explaining, hey, no one knows about DO, but it's actually a better degree. It's MD, plus we also do this other stuff. It's called OMT or OMM. And this guy, they grab some person from the audience and he walks and he has like this kind of asymmetry to his gait. And then they put him on the table and they do some manipulation. And then he walks again and all of a sudden it's a lot better. Whoa, oh my God, OMT, OMM, so amazing. This is really cool. And I was just a pre-med. I didn't know, like, no one in my family's in medicine, etc. So here I am thinking like, oh, DO is, I guess is even better than MD. I'll have these videos talking about MD versus DO and to say, hey, let's just not lie to pre-meds. Let's give them the full truth. And there will inevitably be people who are usually DOs, but not always, but inevitably be several people who are essentially obfuscating the facts and saying, you know, the MCAT difference isn't that big. Oh, you know, I'm a dermatology resident and I'm a DO. It's like, dude, kudos to you. That's badass. But if a pre-med wants to become a dermatologist or a plastic surgeon, are their odds of achieving that goal better going MD or DO? And like these are just simple factual, like these are black and white questions that you can answer. One is better than the other for that path. But then again, the people that want to protect their ego and make it sound like, oh, we're, you know, there's no downside here because I'm a DO, therefore it has to be the same, it has to be equal. It's like, look, you can be a fantastic doctor regardless of your path, because the doctor makes, like, the degree doesn't make the doctor, right? Like you can be a fantastic physician regardless of whether you're MD or DO. The question is for the pre-meds who are deciding between the two because they're constantly being lied to by people who have bigger egos than their desire to actually help people. To those pre-meds, what are you going to tell them? Because to the pre-med, I would tell them something very different. I'd say, look, here are the pros and the cons of MD versus DO. And I think there's many pros for MD and there are many cons for DO. And the main pro to go DO is that it is easier to get into. That is the main pro. The other smaller pro is OMM, OMT. But based on our experience, so I used to think that a lot of people wanted to go DO because of OMM, OMT, because I was the student who saw this thing as, oh, this is really cool, this demonstration. But when you look at the data, the overwhelming majority, based on the study, this is something like 70, 80% of DO doctors never use OMM or OMT after they graduate from med school. They never use it with their patients. I thought that was a big reason why people went into DO. And I have some friends who tried to go MD and they went DO because they couldn't go to MD, whatever. After working with 10,000 plus students at Med School Insiders, I now realize that 99% of the time it's because they can't go MD. This is the backup, DO. Okay, cool. Now that we have that out of the way, like that was a clarifying thing for me that has strengthened over the years. Whereas at the beginning, I thought that more people were interested in OMM, OMT. So what I say to the pre-meds is, look, let's talk about the pros and cons of each. Oh, you want to go into primary care? Cool, that's awesome. But let's maintain optionality, because guess what? 73% of medical students are going to change their mind about their intended specialty. I want you to go into Peds GI. Guess what? If my college advisor was like, hey, Peds GI, DO, you're good, then, and I changed my mind into plastics, I would have been hosed. I mean, the year that I got into plastics, there was, essentially what happened is I went into med school, I realized Peds GI, not for me, I go into plastics instead. Peds GI, very attainable, MD, DO, like, it's not gonna be a huge difference in terms of your odds. Like, it's gonna be attainable for both. Plastics, very, very unlikely to go into plastics as a DO. So there are multiple reasons for that. We don't have to get into all of them, but one big reason is that a lot of the DO schools are not affiliated with these larger academic hospitals, and you're doing these rotations elsewhere. You're not having the same quality of exposure to smaller specialties like plastic surgery. So to the pre-meds, I say, maintain your optionality, go MD, because you might be like me. You may say pediatrics and then go plastics, like literally two opposite ends of the spectrum. Based on the last 10 years of data, plastic surgery is the #1 single most competitive specialty in all of medicine. And when I say that, sometimes people get angry because they say, oh, well, you're incentivized to say that because you went to plastics. It's like, well, no, like you can see our whole grading rubric at specialtyrank.com. You can even change the rubric yourself. If you look at the last 10 years, plastics is always like usually top 2. I think this year was top 3. But if you look at the last 10 years, we're doing a video on this, by the way. Look at the last 10 years, add up the stats across the last 10 years, because there is variation year to year. And you do that for every single specialty, and you can do it with the weightings that you think are the most relevant. We think match rate and step scores are the most important factors to weigh, but maybe you say some other variable is more important. Then you'll see plastic surgery is #1. So to go DO, I would be at a big disadvantage because it is so competitive to get into. It's not even a small disadvantage, it's a large disadvantage. You can also look at the match rates, by the way. We published the match rates of MD versus DO versus IMG on that tool. If you want to maintain optionality, pre-meds, I say go MD unless you have a very strong reason to go DO, which most of the time is going to be your stats are going to hold you back from going MD. So that's what I say to pre-meds. But then to med students, once you're already in it, it's like there's no point in being like, oh, you made the wrong choice. Well, no, maybe you didn't make the wrong choice, right? That's not a helpful thing to say anyways. For the med students, it's like, okay, so now you're here. What specialty do you want to go into? And what's attainable, what's reasonable? And if you are going to go to plastics, which by the way, you can do, but it's way harder. The year I matched, there was out of like the 170 seats in plastics across the nation, there was one DO student. And what all of us said, that the MD matched applicants were like, oh my gosh, she must be badass. She's DO and she matched, like kudos to her. She must be fucking killer. And I don't want those odds, right? Like I don't want to be the 1 out of 170 where people are like impressed that I did it, right? So for the DO students, I'm not going to be like, oh, hey, like you had a lower GPA, MCAT. Well, no, that's not helpful at that stage. But at this stage, I'm saying, okay, what are your goals? And how can we help you get to those goals? So, okay, how are you on standardized tests? So was your MCAT where you wanted it to be or not? Okay, so let's actually spend a little bit more time focusing on the 3 pillars that are going to move your score. So people focus on just content knowledge. That's like, it's over-indexed. Content knowledge. That's how I'm going to improve my score. I need more content knowledge. Well, you also need to focus on the 2 other pillars of study strategies and test-taking skills. If you underperform on the MCAT, there likely is some commonality in terms of those 3 pillars. You're probably underdeveloped on 1 or more of those pillars. And we want to address those to help you do better on COMLEX and USMLE. content knowledge is your study strategy is going to feed into your content knowledge. You learn faster and you forget slower. It also helps you understand the information rather than just memorize it if you study properly. And then the test taking skills, which is the one that gets neglected the most. So the strategy just changes a little bit. And okay, if you want to go into the specialty, let's look at the match rate for DOs for that specialty. Let's look at the average research items. Let's actually try to beat these numbers, right? Let's be above average. Let's maximize our odds. For pre-meds, I think that the biggest issue I have and why I get fired up is like, dude, I was the pre-med that almost got fooled. Stop lying to pre-meds. That's the number one thing. Whether you're an MD or a DO, I think you can be a great doctor. I've seen both myself as a patient based on, where I'm living at the time and, having to change doctors. I don't like, in fact, like with my mom as an example, there's like a hierarchy of doctors that I suggest to her in terms of you can't, it's hard to choose a good doctor and you have very limited information. So yeah, if you're an MD or a DO, I think you can be a great doctor. But again, there's so much misinformation. There was a group of college advisors I spent time with at a Caribbean med school. And dude, like I asked them, I said, how do you decide whether or not a student should go MD versus DO? I kid you not, I'm not making this up. This college advisor told me they go to findado.com and they search for doctors in that specialty. And then they find, of course, there's DOs in every specialty, like duh. And then they say, oh, if I find a doctor in that specialty, then I tell the student, look, you can become this specialty. Look, there's other DOs in this specialty. And I'm like, dude, my mind was blown by how essentially I think I used to give college advisors more benefit of the doubt. But then after spending that week, I was like, okay, there's a lot of misinformation that we need to clarify. We need to clear up a lot of things that is so bad. And for those who are like kind of like, wait, why is this so bad? It's called survivorship bias. If you say, should I drop out of college? Well, yeah, I mean, look at Mark Zuckerberg and look at Bill Gates and look at like, okay, cool. You're finding the survivorship bias. You're finding the few people who dropped out of college who really excelled. But if you look at the majority of people who dropped out of college, they definitely did not excel. They were actually well below the average person who did complete college. So the same thing is happening here, where it's like, yes, you're going to find DOs, you're going to find that dermatology DO, the plastic surgery DO, etc. It happens every year, but you're not optimizing your own odds to do so. Long answer to your short question. That's my stance on MD versus DO. I think as an MD or DO, you can both be fantastic doctors, but my issue is lying to the pre-meds. I've had some calls with students recently, and a lot of them say, I'm undecided between MD and DO because I really like how DO is more holistic. I'm like, oh, tell me, why are they more holistic? Oh, I don't really know, but I just hear that it's the more holistic thing. And I think back to, again, just the misinformation, the lying to pre-meds. It's like, okay, so you want to have your cake and eat it too. You want to say that MD, DO are the same exact curriculum, just plus OMM, OMT, but then also somehow DO is more holistic. But I thought it's the same thing just with OMM. So how is it more holistic? It just logically does not make sense. So again, I think that there have been some irresponsible videos from DOs who are very public facing. There's a certain doctor who is probably 10 million plus subscribers on YouTube. He actually reached out to me when I was in residency before. He was big on Instagram, and I was, MSI was growing fast, and he wanted to collaborate to help start his YouTube thing. But I was also in the middle of a lot of other shit, so we just didn't proceed with that. But he made a video about how he chose DO and how it's more holistic, and he wanted to take care of patients and not just treat them as a disease. I'm like, that's not what MDs do, bro. Why are you bringing MDs down to push yourself up? That's just not how this works. Like, how are you going to say that it's the same curriculum and then say that it's more holistic? I don't understand how the cognitive dissonance like that, how does it bother people? It just doesn't make sense. Let's go one level deeper, which is even content creators, right? So why are such a higher proportion of content creators who are DO, why do they refuse to put DO in their name versus MD? A lot of MD creators will say Kevin Jubal MD, but a lot of the DO creators will just say Dr. so-and-so rather than saying their name DO. One argument is that, well, the public isn't as familiar with the DO degree. It's like, okay, they're not familiar. Help them be more familiar by showing your DO degree. I think that some DOs are not always proud of their degree, which can reinforce the stereotype, the stigma that they're trying to fight against. So long story short, I did a collaboration with a DO doctor, and in the video collaboration I did with him, it was posted on our channel, a lot of the comments were pointing to the fact that he was a DO rather than MD. And it was confusing to me. I was like, wait, why do people not know that you're a DO? Like, how does that matter? And it turns out that in his own following, he had not disclosed that, and I guess he had led people to believe that he was an MD. And there was like all the comments were just about like, oh my god, I knew he was a DO. Oh my god, like finally it's confirmed. Like those were the comments. I think that does happen on YouTube, on Instagram. You don't have to look very far to see it, and that just further worsens the stigma or the lack of pride in the degree. Right? It's kind of like a cycle, because by people having black and white thinking and not wanting to understand the nuance, they then feel lesser than, or they say, oh, DO is not as good as MD. And then, they then reinforce that by when they do get their DO, they don't disclose that degree publicly because of this possible negative stigma, where it's like, dude, be a great doctor and rock the DO and like help fight against that stigma. A lot of time just talking about MD versus DO, but it's a complicated issue, and it really just boils down to whether or not someone is willing to speak to nuance, or they just want to paint in broad strokes. Our ego holds us back so often. Like, it's a constant practice, right? Like, like I go to the racetrack, I'm like, yo, Kevin, check the ego. You're not trying to set some record or PB. You don't need to always have a personal best. You don't have to be better than you were last time. Like, there's other conditions. Don't risk getting into an accident. Like, check the ego. So here, the reason why people don't want to admit that, which again, there are going to be some students who are like, dude, I really love OMM, OMT. Like, this is my thing. I thought that was 50%. I don't want to put an actual number to it, but it's a very, very small minority. Maybe it's 3%, maybe it's 5%, maybe it's 1%. I don't know. But it's a very, very small minority. Now, the thing is, if you can separate out the facts that you can be a good doctor regardless of your test scores, right? And regardless of your degree, then why can we not admit that? And the reason we can't admit that is because we don't fundamentally believe that, oh, I can be a good doctor regardless of test scores or regardless of whether I'm MD or a DO. If we have some insecurity of, oh, I wanted to go MD, but then I got to DO, and that's why, then we're gonna lie to ourselves and lie to others as to why we went DO. So again, it's not black and white thinking, it's the nuance to say that yes, you can actually have a lower GPA and a lower MCAT on average by a substantial margin. Let's not gaslight ourselves and go, oh, it's a very small difference. No, it's not. It's a substantial difference. But I can still be an excellent doctor. Those two things are both true. And I think the thing is that people don't actually believe that. And that's why they say, oh no, like I chose DO because well, do you see how if you can believe the former, which is that your numbers do not dictate how good of a doctor you are, then the latter can just fall into place, which is like, oh yeah, like I couldn't get into MD, like my grades and my MCAT, I didn't take college as seriously, or I decided late, or whatever else. Like I wasn't able to go to MD. I did DO, but like I'm excited to be a kick-ass, whatever kind of doctor.